Excellence is continuous. It can be complex or simple. Each day is an open challenge to achieve success and turn adversity into opportunity. At RGF Executive Search Japan, we make winning a daily objective by aligning unique bilingual talents who invigorate organizations and drive sustainable growth. Excellence begins and ends with people. To execute your Japan recruitment relationship, contact us and let's begin.
Good morning and welcome to the webinar with Rob Claar, CEO and co-founder of HekaBio on Japan Gateway to Asia. My name is Ryan Shepard, Associate Director of Healthcare and Life Sciences at RGF Executive Search in Japan, and I'll be your host this morning. It's a bright and sunny morning here in Japan, but we've got viewers joining us from all around the world, and we've timed this webinar to cater to our US audience. So welcome to all those wherever you are in the world, and glad to have you with us. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing, again, a very good friend of mine and client, Rob Claar. What you might not find on Rob's LinkedIn profile is that not only is he fluent in Japanese and has been here for many decades, but he has also at times led teams that have represented the most number of new category medical devices and new and improved with clinical. He's started up and sold 3 companies in Japan, and his work covers not only medical devices, but a full range of therapeutics, and currently has an in-licensed portfolio of 8 therapeutics and devices across oncology, neurodegeneration, cardiology, and others. Rob and HekaBio this year are commercializing their first product later this year in Japan. So Rob is a key opinion leader and a go-to resource for everything related to getting approved in Japan, penetrating the market, and bringing meaningful healthcare innovation to patients in Japan. A year ago, he spoke about how to accelerate market access into Japan. And this year, we're going to expand upon that because of recent trends. Japan is quickly becoming the go-to launch pad for expansion in Asia. So to speak more into that, Rob, I'm going to bring you on screen. Good morning, Rob. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to give the stage over to you, Rob, and to all the viewers out there, the Q&A will open during Rob's presentation. And once Rob completes his presentation, we'll then entertain any questions you all have, as well as some that we've received from registrants. So please ask away, and I will try to cover everyone's questions. The text box, if you are to ask a question, is anonymous by default to protect your privacy. However, if you wish, you can enter your name into the text box. So, Rob, thank you very much again. I'm going to hand the screen over to you. Feel free to bring up your presentation, and looking forward to what you have to share with us today. Rob?
Thanks so much. So I'll get right into it. I've actually got a lot of slides here. I'd like to share some background on Japan, because I understand we have a global audience with us here today. Get right into it. So I want to talk first about the opportunity in Japan. And what we see is it's the world's 3rd largest healthcare market and a reliable gateway to the rest of Asia Pacific. So we think that Japan has certainly benefited from the current geopolitical situation where more people are looking toward Japan as their first entry point into Asia Pacific. And as you probably know, but you may not know the details, the ultra-aging society here provides both opportunity and challenges. So we'll get into that. And the frustration that I experienced when I first got to Japan in the late 1980s, talking one-on-one with doctors around the country, is their frustration about the pace at which innovations come into Japan. So I've been trying to help solve that issue in my career since I got here. And what we'd like to do is to engage more folks from around the world to help them get into Japan quicker for the benefit of doctors and patients. Just a real quick background here on what Japan looks at, and these are government figures looking at the cost, rising cost of healthcare projection with the lowering, declining working population that pays into the national healthcare system. So how to enable that system to survive and continue to thrive over the years is a key point for the government. As well as we have this lag, which I talked about slightly earlier, but in terms of novel drugs that are approved and available in Japan, there's an enormous gap between that number and the number that is approved and available in the US and Europe. With novel devices, we also see a gap between those that are getting approved every year in Japan versus the FDA. So this is the frustration that we're trying to help solve. So why do companies avoid or delay coming to Japan? I think, there are some challenges. Of course, every startup, depending on your status as a company, but if you're a startup, people need to focus, and people most commonly focus only on the US market. So fair enough, but how can we make it worth your while to think about Japan? This is the issue that we try to solve. Also, people have challenges with Japanese business culture, just understanding the body language, the difference between the nuances of intention and words that are said in meetings, these kind of things, the softer issues, as well as perceived regulatory difficulty. Our experience has been that the Japanese PMDA MHLW process is very well scripted. You can expect what's going to happen, including the timelines to approval. We see it as a transparent and reliable system to work under, but many people don't have that impression yet until they have experience on their own. But what are the reasons why you'd want to come to Japan, besides it being the third largest single country market in the world? We have seen over the years with companies that have come in for whom we've helped get approvals here, that when those companies have an exit or IPO, we've interviewed them afterwards and asked what percentage of the value that you achieved in your company was associated with having that Japan approval. And the qualitative answers that we got were between 5 and 10% of additional company value is built by having that Japan access. Makes sense if you look at the percentage of which Japan's GDP accounts in the world. The regulatory environment is actually getting easier in Japan. Just last year, Japan has made a move to stop requiring early stage clinical trials, and repeating of clinical trials with Japanese patients is in most cases no longer needed. And there are also some fast tracking programs available to get into Japan. And the national reimbursement system, this is interesting because in a national system, yes, there's going to be scrutiny about what is the health economic benefit for your device or drug. But once you get your approval, the national rollout becomes something that you can do immediately, rather than needing to go out and negotiate with separate private insurers around the US, for example. And we believe Japan is the reliable gateway to Asia Pacific. And I'll show you later where certain countries have explicitly given fast tracking to programs that are approved in Japan versus those that are not. But even those that don't certainly have a goodwill aspect. When you work first in Japan, you have key opinion leader relationships in Japan. Those can extend very easily and naturally into your Asia relationships and strategy. So what do we do at HekaBio? Over my career, I've done a number of things, including running a CRO, running a market research company. But HekaBio, we're a platform for accelerating access to medicines and medtech. And we're in licensing programs, as Ryan mentioned. And we're always seeking additional Japan and APAC regional deals. Let's talk a bit more about the demographics and healthcare costs in Japan. So as you may or may not know, 30% of Japanese population is 65 or over at the moment. So this is a big number. It's growing and really going to continue to drive the healthcare costs. So how does that compare with countries around the world in the OECD or G7 countries? The next most aged country around in the G7 anyway is Italy, but it's actually quite different. Italy at 23%, where Japan is at 30%. It's a big difference in terms of that percentage of the population of 65 and over. But the rest of the world, the rest of the developed world is moving in the direction of Japan with lowering birth rates and either declining population or the ability to grow your way out of declining population through immigration. These are really the two factors that all countries will experience. Japan, you probably also know that Japan's a leader in overall life expectancy and also healthy life expectancy. Now, if you look down across the board in terms of the life expectancy and healthy life expectancy, there's about a 10-year gap for most countries, where the last 10 years of your life is expected to not be in optimal health. Japanese government and others working in the aging space are very keen to reduce that 10-year gap, particularly in Japan, and I know that's also true around the world. In terms of healthcare expenditure, the previous slide I showed was Japanese government figures, which show about 9% of GDP being spent on healthcare. The OECD numbers show 11.4% expenditure on healthcare. Either way, Japan's not an outlier in terms of the percent of GDP that it's spending on healthcare. Now, given the population pyramid, the next 10 years are the key to Japan. How can Japan maintain its amazing amazing track record in terms of ensuring healthy life expectancy of its population, when we're going to have this population of 75 and over, 85 and over, really growing over the next 10 years. And also, long-term care is becoming an issue, particularly with home visit nursing. The usage of this is really going up and will continue to go up. Now, long-term care is also included in the healthcare costs, of course, but also viewed as a separate budget item. So how can Japan not break the bank while continuing to care for patients in the home when they need it? One way is by increasing the copay for that in order to slow the decline of that as needed. Another interesting thing I find is that Japan has a couple levers that they can use in a national healthcare system. If you tweak the percentage copay or the amount that you need to pay for an initial hospital visit or a referral into a university hospital, these kind of things, or payment for hospitalization, when you tweak those numbers, it has a big impact on your overall budget. We can see that the Japanese government is very focused on, how can they tweak those without discouraging people from using the system when they need it, but also not using the ambulances as their private taxi in order to go to the hospital. So there's a trade-off there. But you can see that for people 65 and over, they're using more and more home visit nursing, as we saw, but the rate of hospital visits is actually declining in this population based on the levers that the government has pulled in terms of increasing the copay. And hospitalization incidence for people over 65 has also declined, which you wouldn't expect until you dig into this data. But it's also interesting that it used to be free for people over 70, and then there's a copay or a hospitalization fee that is charged for people regardless of your age, and then the overuse of that system declines. And let's take another look at the number of people in Japan involved in healthcare delivery. So Japan's number of doctors and nurses is in the normal range for what you'd expect across the G7 countries. So you look at this and you think, well, we hear that doctors and nurses in Japan are really overworked. They're working long hours. People are getting into different businesses because of the difficulty with the working conditions. How is that going to play out? But Japan looks like it's got exactly the right number of doctors and nurses. But there's some nuances to understand within that, which is the annual number of doctor visits per capita. Japan, for example, is about 4 times the US. So if you've got a cold in Japan, you're more likely to go to a clinic or a doctor than anyone else, than if you were in any other country around the world. And the same number of, even though we've got the right number of doctors and nurses, they're covering a large number of additional beds than their peers in other countries. Again, comparing to the US, it's over 4 times the number of beds that the doctors and nurses need to cover within the Japanese hospital and clinic ecosystem. Now, you can also see that actually all these countries around the world have had a declining number of hospital beds in their countries. Japan particularly knows that they do have an over infrastructure of hospital beds and are trying to do what they can to reduce that by working on the licensure and working on a national basis in order to find the best mix of types of facilities. And in terms of also, so in conclusion there, I'm sorry, the doctors and nurses, there are enough of them, but they're way overworked. They may be doing 4 times the number of patient coverage and hospital beds coverage to their peers in other countries, which is not a sustainable system. And if we look in the long-term care workers, the government has shown also that there's an expected worker shortage. This is what we have today, about 500,000 people, that worker shortage is expected to grow over this key period between now and 2040 to over 500,000 workers. Now, the government has done some other things in order to help solve that gap in skilled nursing and long-term care workers by giving visas to overseas people who have been licensed and have studied Japanese and are coming in. But Japan is famously not going to quickly grow its way out of worker shortages through immigration only. I think that there's going to be a need to increase wages and increase the profitability within long-term nursing in order to encourage more people to get into that field. So some summary and solutions to Japan. How can Japan maintain its top performing universal access healthcare system? These are my opinions. In terms of people, continue to grow the overall working population through immigration, just because with the national healthcare system and the national health insurance, you're paying into the national health insurance system through wages. It's a graduated tax, capped, but it's a graduated tax on your earnings. The only way to grow that is through growing the population of people who are working. And growing the number of long-term care workers through immigration as well, and improved compensation within that. So the only way to enable companies to improve, to be able to afford improved compensation is by applying more reimbursement points to services that are offered outside of the hospital and in the home. We also see that in addition to the overpopulation of healthcare beds in Japan, there's overutilization of healthcare services. This can be further impacted by increasing the copay or increasing the other levers that the government has to limit that overuse. Japan should also continue to work on reducing the number of hospital beds to alleviate healthcare worker overload. I believe that's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be an easier challenge to solve than suddenly graduating more doctors from medical schools. Changing the setting of healthcare utilization to outside the hospital is going to continue to be important, not only in the long-term care nursing staff issue, but what are the technologies and tools that we can use outside the hospital to enable more in-home patient monitoring, et cetera. If you look at many of the innovations that are happening around the world, you see digital health as a key driver. Japan has been slow to adopt digital health solutions for in-home use, primarily because the government so far has a hard time understanding the health economics of outside the hospital care delivery. So reimbursement for patient monitoring solutions, digital health solutions, is a challenge right now. We believe that the payers in Japan are getting more sophisticated about how to apply economic value to those solutions, but this is an ongoing issue. Can be solved partially through the reimbursed healthcare system, but partially also through expanding the patient pay aspect of healthcare delivery. Also, we see there's inefficiencies in the hospital in terms of particularly data solutions that could be applied across Japan. Now, we're not in the business of hospital medical records or patient medical records or anything, but what I see is that there's this huge gap between, if you've got national healthcare system, single payer, you must assume that Japan has the most perfect set of data around the world anywhere, where anybody should be able to go in there, analyze that data, understand what hospitals are delivering the best standard of care, how we can drive that standard of care throughout the entire system, even for people who are living in remote villages on an island somewhere in Japan. Being able to use and mine that data in order to improve the efficiency within particular hospitals, within hospital systems, and deliver better care across the country. These are key factors for the improvement of care going forward. And Japan has done a good job of deregulating and making it easier to get into Japan, removing requirements for early stage clinical trials. And just recently, they announced that they're going to enable English submission for new drug applications. That's a big change, and I didn't predict that would happen, but here we are. And further deregulation of, for example, Japan tends to require more stringent preclinical data than other countries around the world, and so we need to look into that and understand. But I think also Japan can do some effort on their own about deregulation as far as that goes, and harmonization, further harmonization. Also, post-marketing surveillance studies often are costly and don't deliver a lot of value or meaningful data. How to rationalize that and take some of that cost out of the system is also an important issue that we're thinking about. And national health insurance system, how to improve the environment for introducing innovative and cost-saving technologies. I think that Japan is getting there, but not yet as sophisticated as they should be in understanding true health economic benefit versus budget impact. So if you're in the government and you're looking at budget impact, that's a pretty short-term window. So you're looking at the next year, what's it going to do to my budget, or maybe 2 years. But if you're looking at health economic impact, you're looking at a longer window, and you're looking at true savings into the healthcare system, rather than adding this new technology, this new drug. How much is that going to add to my budget over this next year? And since I've got a static budget that I need to balance, what else? What can I remove from the budget in order to enable this new innovation to come in? These are the issues, but we want to help the government to get better at that long-term view. And inevitably, even a year ago, we would not have been talking, I think, about the patient pay market. But here we are. And we believe now that the patient pay market outside of national health insurance system needs to be expanded so that some expensive therapies can come in, perhaps be covered by private insurance, perhaps be covered by patient copay, but in any case, outside of the national health insurance system, which does have limits on its ability to continue to pay with the declining working population. Now, how does Japan look as a gateway to the rest of Asia? As we know, Japan is a sophisticated market, highly advanced healthcare system, and early adoption of cutting-edge medical technologies. It's not early enough, as I said early. We're trying to make Japan and the US be simultaneously, aim for simultaneous or at least synchronized approvals. But Japan is willing and ready to adapt these cutting-edge medical technologies. Also, well-developed clinical infrastructure and also key opinion leader doctors that have great reputations around the world and in Asia, where those relationships will help to facilitate and accelerate. Stringent standards means that Japan is one of the stringent regulatory authorities recognized around the world, which helps with the translation from Japanese approval into others, including Asia. And global recognition of a Japanese approval can significantly enhance your company reputation, company value, as I mentioned earlier, as well as credibility in other markets, including Asia. So when we look at, if you have a PMDA review, MHLW stamped approval, how does that help you in key regions around the world? Well, in the US, it does help you, Canada as well, Mexico, Brazil, other key markets that don't have particularly codified agreements with Japan, but the recognition as a stringent regulatory authority certainly does help, even for those countries that we've said no here. Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well. And in Asia Pacific, which is our topic for today, Australia, a lot of benefit there. No benefit in China, India to some degree, but in ASEAN countries and New Zealand, Northeast Asia, including Korea, Taiwan, a lot of benefit that you do get here. Taiwan has moved more toward the FDA instead of referencing Japan, but the relationships and the recognition is still there, still strong there now. One important one to mention once again is Australia, where if you could do simultaneous development in the US, Japan, and Australia, it enables you to save money off of your US development. If you're running a clinical trial, you could maybe have cut in half, the number of cases that you're doing in the US, save that money. And in Japan, you could take on 25% of that caseload and another 25% of that in Australia. And what you do in Australia, you can get reimbursed at a rate of 43% of money spent comes right back to you. So really some very interesting international collaboratory methods for getting into Japan, Australia, US simultaneously if a company has the vision to do so. This is an eye chart. I apologize, but this can be made available, and you can push freeze on your video, I think, later. But just to show a bit more about, what is it that enables fast tracking in Asia with your Japanese approval. So we highly encourage people to go after Japan. If possible, don't wait until you've got US approval. Come into Japan, synchronize that development, get in here quickly, and use that as a springboard to the rest of Asia. This is my intro, which I'll just gloss over. But I was fortunate enough to come to Japan in just after college and be hired by an amazing think tank that enabled me to travel around and meet doctors and kind of got me on the path that I'm on now. Then I founded a market research company. After that, a CRO, and now HekaBio. As Ryan mentioned, we're just getting into the clinical phase at HekaBio now this year. And with that, I'll end, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Rob. Fantastic presentation, and we'll leave the slide with the QR code on there for a moment so people can scan it and connect with Rob. We have a ton of questions pouring in. I'm kind of going to go from macro to micro because we have a variety of questions here. I think the big burning question is that with recent news, there's been gradual geopolitical risks emerging that have been sort of trade winds to Japan emerging as the preferred launch pad for Asia, and of course the recent tariffs that certainly will increase those tensions with China particularly. What's your take on overall how Japan is emerging as the go-to launch pad in Asia at that macro level?
Yeah, I think that that Japan has a lot of opportunities right now. I think Japan has some advantages with the current geopolitical situation. Japan needs to be very skillful in being friends with regional neighbors as well as with the U.S. Who knows what's going to happen with the upcoming Japan-U.S. meeting, and I think that's going to be an important meeting to take a look at. But hopefully Japan can avoid the tariff rush, and I believe that there's a chance that we could. And I also think that with the U.S. sort of cracking down on trying to get U.S. companies not to do as much business with China has caused a lot of some very interesting things to happen. One is that we see a lot of Chinese companies now selling off assets and starting up new companies to get into the U.S. As a new company in the U.S. Some of that, but companies wanting to jump into Asia. If you rewind to 10 years ago, and you would see that most companies would be thinking about going into China first. I think that's changed, where people realize that the Japanese regulatory authorities have done a good job of deregulating. People don't really know that Japan is easier than it used to be, so that's an important message to put out there. But at the same time, China has politically become more difficult for many companies, and China has also tightened its regulatory regime so that you need to have this made in China element. Often people are needing to set up a joint venture, and so that makes it more challenging for China particularly. Japan, meanwhile, has this system where you can get an approval in your own name in Japan without ever setting up an office here. So this is something that many companies may also not know. You can appoint someone to be your in-country caretaker or your designated marketing authorization holder. You can be sitting in Europe, you can be sitting in the US, never have an office here, but you've got an approval in your own name. That's kind of a rare benefit of Japan.
Interesting. Well, if I was to summarize your presentation today, it sounds like win in Japan, you can win in Asia. And regardless of the global trends, Japan is clearly saying, hey, we want foreign innovation. We're relaxing our rules. We're making an English channel available. And although they're slowly turning on the tap to immigration, for example, your example of the nurses and the skilled workers, skilled nurses, the number of imported talent there, but they're also saying, hey, we recognize we have some work to do internally, domestically, whether that's copay, how resources are managed, and reducing resources or reducing demands on the working hours and workload of healthcare workers. Would that be an accurate summary?
Yeah, thank you. That's very
Okay,
helpful.
so one of
Thanks.
our questions is particularly regarding those staffing trends. How does that compare to the rest of Asia or other regions? The workload on healthcare workers.
Great question. I don't know that. I would like to know that.
Okay.
Yeah, when we look at other Asian markets, we're looking kind of top down in terms of what's the regulatory and who can be a good distribution partner.
Sure.
And the size of the market. We look at the demographics because we want to know, what's the average age and how quickly is that country aging. We look at those before we look at the issues that you just mentioned about worker overload. I have to assume though that that overworking of workers is less of a problem in places like Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, etc., just because you've got such a young population. So I've got to believe that it's not the same issue for the next couple of decades.
Makes sense. Okay, then. Well, to your point about the copay market becoming more of a viable option in Japan, one viewer, Rohan, rather. Hello, Rohan. He asks, as you mentioned, Japan has already established healthcare reimbursement system, but what strategies do you recommend for foreign biotech and medtech companies to accelerate market entry while aligning with Japan's regulatory and reimbursement landscape?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think people it's a little bit of a convoluted answer to this one. So I think people, companies want to know what their ability to get reimbursement in Japan is upfront. And this is the art and science of market access to Japan, right? It's very easy. It's easier to tell what is the regulatory pathway, and there are plenty of consultants and CROs that can bring that up. It's harder to find someone who can definitively tell you what your reimbursement pricing is going to be, but that's what drives your economics. So you really need to know that. And we see a lot of companies want to get deals done with distributors and get upfront payment from a distributor or a licensee in Japan. How do you get that deal done before you know what the reimbursement pricing is going to be in the national healthcare system? You don't know what the economics are, but how do you get that deal done? So this is always a trick. If you are going into a similar category and you can claim a predicate, then you're pretty much assured of sliding into that predicate pricing. You may be able to get a slight premium off of that. If there are particular usability or pediatric or innovation benefits associated with the device or drug, you may be able to get a premium on that. But if you're going for a new category, or if you're going for something that's not been seen before, or there's not really a relevant predicate, then beside the similar category or similar functionality, similar treatment for similar modality, you're able to produce your cost data and deliver that to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare in your reimbursement pricing request. So you tell them, look, this is everything. This is what it cost me to deliver this therapy to Japan, and in other words, below this price we cannot launch. So then that begins your negotiation with the government. The trick is you cannot submit your reimbursement application until you have regulatory approval. So we want to encourage companies to come into Japan simultaneously to the US. But how to help them speed that up until they've got pricing reference in the US, this is a conundrum that many companies are considering, I know. It's a bit of an art in figuring out how to influence the government, how to influence key opinion leader doctors to get emotionally behind the program in order to support your regulatory and pricing strategy. That's really the key to success, is getting those doctor relationships. If you can do that, then there's a good pathway for getting reasonable reimbursement. And we do believe that Japan has the ability and track record for paying reasonable rates in the healthcare system. However, there are some cases where you could look at a program and say, hey, this is a great innovation, but Japan's not going to be able to figure out how to pay for it in the national healthcare system. Just unlikely to happen. So in that case, is there a creative way to approach that? For example, by launching as a patient pay device first. So even if you get regulatory approval to not seek national healthcare reimbursement and go straight into patient pay, and kind of like an over-the-counter type of approach. This is also possible and available, but in a country where people are used to paying minor copay out of pocket, telling them that they need to pay for everything is a jump. So rather than convincing the national health insurance that there's this health economic benefit for the population, you need to convince the population that they want to pay for something, which can be a different hurdle. We also see, and there's even a third way potentially here, which I think is interesting. But since many large employers are needing to keep their employees happy, just because of the declining ability to hire new college graduates, which is a declining population, people want to have this sort of mark of approval of being a good employer. And people want to have this mark of approval of being a good employer for women in the workplace. So if you get that validation, that helps you to then hire the latest and greatest cohort of college graduates when they come out. How do you get that? Is by potentially offering for the company to cover that copay for a new approved medical device that's come out and the government can't figure out how to pay for it, but why not the company? So, there's a device that's particularly useful for women, and why not convince a few large employers, and then others will follow, to pay for that on a monthly basis on behalf of their employers in order to get that reputational benefit out of that. So there's some other ways to approach these systems, but honestly, there's also, if there's an innovation that or maybe the program is an innovation for certain countries but not a match for Japan at all, not through patient pay, not through employer coverage, not through national health insurance, then there may be a way where you say, well, this innovation is going to be better for Indonesia or Vietnam, not Japan, so go there first. We don't see that very often, just by the nature of the deal flow that comes to us. But there are examples where, under the umbrella of innovation management, you might map out the world. You might map out Asia and say, hey, this is U.S. and a few other countries in ASEAN first. Think about Japan later when there's a more proven health economic story, or whatever the argument might be. We would like to ourselves get to that point where we can also have a footprint around Asia and be able to offer that type of innovation management advice and portfolio management. We're not there yet.
Thanks, Rob. Well, it sounds like copay is really emerging as a key theme today, and it ties into a question from Eric Persoff around digital remote monitoring. And we were speaking a bit too on the subject of digital therapeutics in our last conversation, where you had alluded to data being needed from both reimbursable and copay market. Eric's question is, to what extent, regarding the use of health economic arguments to support reimbursement for digital remote monitoring, to what extent is this an issue with difficulty in changing the framework in which reimbursement decisions are made?
Yeah, that's a great question, and on a case-by-case basis. I think Japan is slowly realizing the need to approve and reimburse these digital therapeutics, but it's slow. We saw a couple of examples last year where digital health solutions were approved through the regulatory process, but were not reimbursed. What's the backstory on those? Is it because the government offered a reimbursement price which was lower than what the company wanted, or did the company just seek to go into the patient pay market to begin with? I don't know those backstories. They're very confidential, I assume, but I think there's a number of things going on there. I believe that Japan needs to become more sophisticated at understanding true health economic benefit. I think some ways to work on this may be more government payer peer-to-peer interactions with other countries around the world. For example, UK has a very well-respected health economic methodology and accepted reporting type of formats that in my experience we've used UK data, UK studies, and then taken that and applied Japan rates to those. So if you have for example a health economic study that's been done for the authorities in the UK, and you then put Japanese data into there, and you then apply the because you're always comparing to currently available standard of care, right? So you look at data which you could buy from some groups in Japan, and then map across there. So for standard of care, what is the adverse event rate, and what does it cost when an adverse event happens? What does that cost the system? So you build all these different factors into it. Japan's not going to believe overseas data, but overseas framework within which you plug the Japanese data and real world evidence becomes a convincing story. So we've had some success doing that. But I think the mindset of the payers, the people at the National Health or Economics Department within the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare still need to work with industry in terms of improving sophistication of being able to pay effectively for those programs, because they're going to be, I think some companies may be quite happy to jump immediately into patient pay, but others may say, no, we're going to wait until we're sure we can get reimbursement in the national health system. How much traction can we get with large employers? I don't know. It's just an idea. So there's other ways to work at this, but I think international cooperation between different regulators and payer authorities will be an effective way to do that, more than because the government doesn't want to feel that they're getting overly badgered by self-interested companies, right? So I think taking it both directions on a product by product basis, where companies need to argue for their own benefit, of course, but having if there's a way to facilitate more peer-to-peer engagement on how to think about longer term health economics, I think that would be a really good thing.
Thank you. And a few viewers are asking about what Japan's doing to decrease drug loss in Japan as one of the key deterrents to global CEOs to enter Japan and put Japan on their roadmap. And you've spoken a little bit about the English channel, the attaching of foreign data. If there was a CEO out there with an innovative product watching this right now who wasn't in Japan, what's the number one piece of advice or thing that they should know about recent changes to consider coming to Japan?
Yeah, thanks. So we talk a lot about wanting companies to do simultaneous development in the US and Japan. But the drug loss or lag specifically references things that are approved overseas and haven't made it into Japan yet. If you've got approval or traction overseas, then you're likely to be on a target or wish list from the Japanese government. If so, there's going to be some very serious fast tracking available for you. There's going to be also government subsidies for doing that development, because the government is very keen to eliminate that drug lag and loss, where around the world we see that in the US and Europe, phase 2 and beyond clinical trials, only 30% of them have a Japan element or even plan. And so the government is very eager to see that number grow, but more so what stares them in the face is the number of novel drugs that have been approved overseas and not in Japan. So this is a political issue where Japan really wants to clear out that lag and loss issue, and they have made funds available for that and fast tracking initiatives as well.
Thank you. And you've also spoken about how Japan's one of the few countries where you can have a representative in Japan as your MAH, but not have an entity here particularly. But as we've both observed, commitment and loyalty is something very important in Japan, that doctors want to see a certain degree of commitment long-term to Japan. And so having an entity here, at least from in my experience as an executive search consultant, goes a long way. But from your perspective, in what circumstances should an innovator go direct and set up an entity here, a KK, a corporation, versus in what circumstances is setting up an MAH the right path?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the size of the market is, but early on in development, you're not going to be able to. So your point is really well taken. The establishing and maintaining those relationships over the long term is really important, particularly with the doctors, to get that support that helps you with your regulatory approval speed. It helps you with your reimbursement pricing success. Super important to get that. So we would, to what degree can a company build and maintain those relationships without having a local entity or local presence of some sort? Because there's no way that a third-party hired CRO or a consultant can do a very good job in building those relationships. The doctors want to talk with the inventors and the chief medical officer of the company. They want to have that level of relationship, not just meeting the local business people who are taking on the license, right? So, or not license. I didn't mean to talk about licensing. For example, if you're hiring you may well hire a CRO to do the clinical development, regulatory, et cetera. But to what degree can the company commit to having boots on the ground in order to build those relationships? That's really important. We've seen some success cases back when I was running the CRO, when I think overseas companies tend to underplay or underestimate the amount of effort that it's going to take to build those relationships in Japan. So, but there was a couple of companies that did it really well, where they would have their key people come in every quarter to meet with the doctors, even though there wasn't a clinical trial going on specifically. This was a device program that was using overseas data. They came in and really fostered and nurtured those relationships, and they ended up with very fast approval, great reimbursement. So that was really the way to do it. And we've seen other cases where companies have underestimated the effort or not put in the effort, and didn't get that level of success. So I think for a company, overseas company that may be considering what to do in Japan, I agree with Ryan that that a lot of effort needs to be put into those soft issues of relationship building, and so that the Japanese folks don't believe that or don't suspect that the company is here one day and then gone the next. So they want to have those longer term relationships. That's really important. If you can do that by sending leadership team over once a quarter, that's a big lift. Or would you rather set up your own office to do that? That's up to the company. I think it could be done either way. But leaving it completely into the hands of third parties is not the best recipe for success, I think.
Thanks, Rob. So it sounds like if the C-level executives are prepared and can justify coming to Japan once a quarter or so to develop those key relationships for a certain number of years to get results and build the foundation here, then great, direct path could be the right path. If not, then maybe with working with a partner like HekaBio and exploring that path could be a more feasible long-term way to sort of start, step by step. How would you describe the ideal partner for HekaBio? Who out there should consider contacting HekaBio?
Oh, thanks. So yeah, we're always looking for new opportunities to partner and in-license for Japan or Asia Pacific. So we're focused on the regional deals, and we also need to see some level of clinical data, right? So we're not able to jump into programs that are too early. So we need to see, in drug terms, we need to see phase 1 clinical data at least before we're able to jump into something. And then for a device, we like to see design lock on the device, so typically we're getting engaged with the companies before they have an approval anywhere, and seeking to help them to streamline their process so that there can be synchronized or simultaneous approval in the US and Japan, and maybe some others as well. So if people are in that stage or will be in that stage over the next 12 months, we're always eager to talk.
Fantastic. Well, we're out of time for today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Rob?
Not that I can think of. Thanks very much for having me, Ryan.
Thank you. And if you're watching this and you are looking for talent in Japan, growth starts with having the right leader in place. RGF Executive Search is here for that. We cover all industries, all functions. I personally specialize in CEO caliber talent for pharmaceutical, life science, and diagnostics companies in Japan. So do reach out if you want to get some direct insights on what's going on in the market. It is more competitive than ever with all the downsizing and flatter structures. And I would also like to ask viewers from this to please drop a comment into the event on LinkedIn, because I would love to get your feedback. What was your key takeaway? And who would you suggest we reach out to be our next speaker? We are looking to continue these webinars, but we need your feedback to know where the value is for you so we can make this content more valuable. And with that, thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day or evening ahead. And again, Rob, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.